Whether you're watching it on Facebook, YouTube, wherever, thanks so much for watching. Today, we're going to be talking about a really fun topic. We're going to be talking about not like, how horrible taxes are going to be or how complicated estate planning is or any of those types of topics we talk about a lot. Today, we're talking about a fun one, the best places to retire. We're actually going to go through a top 10 list later on in this video of the 10 best places to retire. But first, I want to set a little more groundwork so that we're all kind of thinking about this the right way. So before we begin, this is really oversimplified. I could talk about retirement locations and tax treaties and stuff like that for hours and hours and hours. Please consult with an expert. So if you're looking at a specific area, if you're looking at moving to Florida, or you're looking at moving to Puerto Rico or some of the other places we're going to be talking about in this presentation, make sure you talk to an expert. Make sure you talk to like a CPA, tax attorney, maybe even a local CPA, maybe like a Florida CPA, to make sure that this really is a net benefit for you financially. And in the examples to follow, which we're going to go through a lot of different locations, I'm assuming a US citizen with high US based savings. Okay, the reason that's important, we're not getting into things like foreign earned income exclusions and different kind of tax code issues like that. We're really just talking about kind of that expat situation. A lot of our examples are also going to be people that want to stay right here in the United States. Just what are some of the best places, best cities and states right here in the United States for someone looking to retire. But of course, if you know me, I am going to talk a little bit internationally as well. So this is, again, US citizen, English speaker, kind of US values, those types of things. So we'll come back and talk a little bit more about that. But the big question, there's a lot of big questions in retirement, like how much income are you going to need? And, how do you want your beneficiaries set up? Who's going to get the money? Like different things like that. One of the biggest questions that actually underpins and drives everything from when you should file the Social Security to how your health insurance is going to work is this question on the screen right here. Where should you live in retirement? Where? It's going to drive every other variable. And this is a really personal question. I mean, if you're really into like downhill skiing, you might pick a place like, Denver, Colorado or something like that. Whereas let's say you're really into like sitting on a beach, you might pick like Costa Rica or Puerto Rico or like some of these places with these beautiful shorelines. There's a lot of great areas in Mexico and all over the Caribbean, really all over the United States too, whether it's Gulf side, Atlantic side, Pacific side, whatever. It really is going to come down to what you like to do for fun, what you're looking to do. And I'll just tell you from experience, if you have any kids out there or that are going to maybe soon have like grandkids or something like that, they are going to be a monstrous factor here. So what do I mean by that? If you have a son or daughter that's 1,000 miles away from you, the second they have a grandson or granddaughter, you are going to have an extreme urge to move to wherever they're located. I'll just tell you, I've seen this happen dozens and dozens of times. And, those babies have a powerful pull. But regardless of what the factors are feeding into this decision, this is personal. Like I said, this might be about where your family's located. This might be about maybe you're really into deep sea fishing. Well, you can't deep sea fish very much out in the middle of the, Canadian wilderness or something like that, or in some landlocked state in Nevada or something. You're not doing a lot of deep sea fishing there. So you got to really sit down and make this list. What are the things that are important to you? And of course, we're talking about lifestyle. That's kind of my bottom point here. We're talking about climate. Do you like a warm climate, cool climate, temperate climate? How about this? What kind of food do you like? There's some places on this list that I would struggle to live in a little bit because I've been there and I'm not a huge fan of the food. And, it's a big part of your life, right? What are you going to eat? And, but these other factors that are on here, financial, that's one that we're going to talk a lot about, right? Cost of living. What's the cost of buying a home, owning a home? What are property taxes like? What are income taxes like? All those sorts of types of things we're going to talk a lot about here. But a bigger question is the one up on top here, the values. Okay, are these places, whether it's just a state, whether it's a neighboring state, I'm amazed all the time when I just look at even like Wisconsin, maybe like northeastern Wisconsin where I'm located, like around Green Bay, and then go to a bigger city that's relatively close, go to like Minneapolis or Chicago. A lot of times very different values, sometimes different spiritual values. On the human rights side, we're in America, so that tends to be similar. Rule of law tends to be similar. But when we start looking internationally, some of these things are going to come up, right? You don't want to live in an area where there's a really weak rule of law, where the government can come in and, take your property and stuff like that. So start making these lists. What's important to you? What are your values? For me, freedom is a huge, huge value. That's going to eliminate 80, 90% of the globe. If I want a place that's as free as the United States, it's pretty select group of countries that are in that neighborhood. But now maybe I'm going to focus in the United States. Okay. Different parts of the country are going to have different spiritual values, different, obviously different climates, different foods, and very huge different financial impacts. But I'm not going to talk as much on the value side in this presentation. Full disclosure, it is factoring in a little bit to my analysis, but you know, I'm going to talk a lot about the financial. I'm going to talk a little bit about the lifestyle. But as you're looking for the place you're going to live in retirement, you should really be thinking about all of these things. And as a general framework for the analysis I'm going to present here, when I'm going to go through in my opinion, this is just one guy's opinion, but very financially heavy oriented, but the top 10 places to retire. One of the top things I'm looking for is strong rule of law, strong property rights. I want a high degree of freedom. I don't want to have to worry about the government coming in, taking over my business or you know, taking over my property or different things like that. That is going to eliminate a whole lot of areas, a whole lot of countries. Also, I want a developed country. So what does that mean? It's going to eliminate a lot of very cheap, very low cost of living areas. And part of the reason for that is I want fast internet. I want good roads. I want big airports. I want a really strong financial system. I want to be able to wire money from my bank account into a US based bank account and vice versa, or a savings account or a brokerage account or whatever. That's going to limit it a little bit. And when we look at developed countries with strong rule of law, high degrees of freedom, we're down to a pretty small group of countries already. And then we're going to start looking at the tax situation. We obviously want a low income tax. That's one that comes up obviously very early in the conversation. But you want to factor in all the taxes when you're looking at a place: sales taxes, property taxes, you know, any kind of little tax. You know, there's states that have no income tax, but they kind of get you other ways. You know, they have very high gas taxes, or they have very high, you know, some states it's very expensive to like renew license plates on a vehicle. So you want to look at all these things in your budgeting and when you're deciding on places to look at. So what I'm going to start off with here is just some very broad strokes ideas. So this is in the United States. Every state here with that pink color has no income tax. So that's Washington, Nevada, Wyoming, South Dakota, Tennessee, Florida, Texas, and Alaska. New Hampshire has that hash line. I don't know if it's covered up by my video or not. On my screen, it's covered up, but I think you guys can see it up there in the Northeast. They don't have a wage tax. So they will tax dividends and capital gains and things like that, but they do not tax wages. So that's kind of a semi, you know, there is and there isn't. Now, Puerto Rico is interesting here because you'll notice it's not shaded pink, because Puerto Rico does have a Puerto Rican tax, but it's extremely low, and they're not subject to federal income taxes. So we'll come back to that. It's going to be in my top 10 list. I don't want to tip my hand too early here. But when you're looking at states, a thing that I hear a lot that I just wanted to make sure I included in this presentation is people talk about the 183-day rule. So they'll say, hey, if you're in a state more than 183 days, you're a resident. And that is not true. Okay. Some states that is true, but some states that's not true. It varies state to state. Some states have very strict, very specific boxes you need to check in order to be a resident of that state. And they're not necessarily difficult, but you just want to know what the rules are on a state to be able to be a resident there for tax purposes. And again, I strongly recommend you consult experts in this area and consult specifically with local experts whenever possible that can tell you the residency rules and things like that. Always want to read the law, but nothing beats an expert. So don't take the 183-day rule as gospel. A lot of states are like that, some are not. I also want to chat about something that Eric reminded me to include in this presentation, which is how Social Security gets taxed, because this is really going to vary considerably. So the blue states here do not tax Social Security. So I'm not going to read them all off because it's a whole bunch of them. But then there are other states in the green that will give some Social Security benefit exemptions based on age or like low income. Like if your income's under a certain dollar amount, they won't tax Social Security, things like that. And then the pink ones, so like Montana, New Mexico, they will tax Social Security, but in kind of a modified way. So they kind of favor it a little bit. And then Utah taxes Social Security, and then the gray ones are the best, right? Florida, Texas, South Dakota, Wyoming, Nevada, Washington, and Alaska, because they don't have an income tax. So you don't have to worry about if Social Security is included or not. So I am tipping my hand a little bit here as to where some of the areas we're going to be going to in this presentation today. But what I would say in general make your decision based more on values, climate, things like that. Once you set those criteria, it's usually pretty easy. I mean, you can see all the way from a Washington climate to a South Dakota, Wyoming climate to Nevada to Texas to Florida, all the way down to Puerto Rico, really all the way up to Alaska. In all of those areas, you have states that don't have an income tax, and across, even like within the state of Texas, you will get different value systems depending on whether you're in Austin or whether you're in Corpus Christi. There's monstrous differences in some of these places. So like, start off with kind of what region of the country do you want to be, drill down from there, because you can usually find a no income tax area or a very low income tax area. And what I would say is, don't make the decision binary. So don't make it based on like, I will only live in a state with no income tax, because some state, like a state, for example, like we're going to be talking about with Georgia, they have an income tax, but it's extremely favorable if you're over 65. So we'll be talking about Georgia in particular, and Tennessee, different places like that. You want to look at everything. You want to look at, how much do I think I'm going to spend? Let's say that much is subject to sales tax. How much of my income in each of these places is going to be subject to tax? My Social Security, let's say in some of these states won't be, some of them will be. And what you'll end up finding is, you'll be surprised that some of the states that may even seem on the surface to not be as good, like a Georgia where they have an income tax, when you factor everything in and the cost of housing and everything else, like Mississippi is another good example. Very, very low cost of living can overcome a 3 or 4% income tax. So you'll see as we get through this presentation, some of the resources that I'm going to use. A great one is Expatistan. So that's EXPAT. ISTAN, expatistan.com, cost of living comparison. And you can pick different cities all over the world. So like here I did San Juan, Puerto Rico, and Green Bay, Wisconsin. San Juan, Puerto Rico is an 8% lower cost of living than Green Bay, Wisconsin. So you can just start to get a feel through some resources like this for different areas. Another great one in the United States is Smart Asset. They have a really awesome, if you just go Smart Asset cost of living calculator, here's a good example where I have Green Bay versus Knoxville, Tennessee. And it says the cost of living in Knoxville is similar to the cost of living in Green Bay, but you can look at different categories. So the big differences here for taxes, Knoxville, Tennessee is 22% better, 22% lower from the standpoint of income tax, property tax. Even though Tennessee has a higher sales tax situation for someone with a $55,000 income is going to be better in Tennessee. But if I click over to that housing tab, the housing is more expensive in Tennessee. So that's why the overall cost of living is similar, because you got to pay more for a house. You got to pay more if you're having a mortgage or anything like that. But you're getting a lot of tax savings. So this is going to vary a little bit based on things like, how often you like to go out to eat, what kind of food you like to eat. Are you cooking your own food? Do you want to own 100 acres? It's a lot cheaper to do that in like Montana or the Dakotas or Wyoming or something than it is to own 100 acres in like San Francisco. So you want to start to think about these things and really craft more of like your dream. Like, what is your real dream of what you want to do in retirement? Where do you want to be? What do you want it to be like? What do you want your lifestyle to be like? What do you want the climate to be like? All those things. And then start figuring out how close you can get to that. You'll be surprised. A lot of times you can get that kind of dream scenario actually easier than your current scenario, and cheaper and lower cost of living and everything else. But a lot factors into this, like family and things like that. And I understand all that. We're going to have a little more fun today though. But today we're going to talk, or this other resource is Cato. So cato.org/human freedom index. And they rank countries based quantitatively based on a bunch of different factors like property rights, rule of law, corruption, different things like that. And I think there's 16 or 17 countries that they rank ahead of the United States in the Human Freedom Index. But what's really interesting about that is if you look at like the top 20 or 30, they're all pretty good. I mean, they're all really interesting, and you're not going to have a China or something like that up in that list, which you want to think about that. Do your values align? Are they going to let you own your own property and different things like that? It's a big deal. I mean, if you spent your whole life in the United States, it's going to be very difficult for you to move to China and not feel like very claustrophobic from a what you're allowed to do standpoint. So I factor this into my analysis, and we'll talk about some other outside third parties that do these analyses on like where to live and the best places to live too. But that's a really good resource, Cato Institute Human Freedom Index. So now a little bit of a drum roll. We're going to go through the 10 best places to live. I should put a little asterisk on here. This is not necessarily the 10 best places for you to live. These are just more to get your brain going, get some ideas flowing, and learn a little bit of interesting information. So I got to do a super fun one first, right? Because I live in Green Bay. So Green Bay, Wisconsin. Now you got to like a little bit of the cold. You got to like your Four Seasons and things like that. The biggest draw to Green Bay is the cost of living. It's extremely low. Specifically, housing is extremely low. The home that I live in here, you know, if you go buy a 3,000 or 4,000 square foot brick house, most areas of the country, you're going to pay 3, 4, 5 times what we had to pay. Green Bay, very good housing, great infrastructure. Not only do you have the Packers here, but you have a lot of big trucking companies, a lot of transportation companies, really nice roads. Things are kept up really well. And you have a really diverse lifestyle. I don't think a lot of people understand really Wisconsin, Michigan, some of those types of areas. I can go on Lake Michigan. I can go up in the middle of the woods. I can go out on Lake Winnebago. I can go on a little pond. I can go on a trail. I can go watch, the Green Bay Packers play at Lambeau. There's a lot of different options of things that I can do. Is it as many options as a Denver or LA or something? Like, no, absolutely not. But if you're looking for a really low cost place to live with great infrastructure and a lot of different things you can do, I really believe Green Bay is a pretty strong option. And now Eric's going to roll his eyes and say you should do Rhinelander, but whatever it may be, if you like being in Packer country, there's a lot of good options for you. Let's move on though. Let's go a little bit bigger picture. So let's look at New Hampshire. New Hampshire is really interesting. Cost of living wise, very competitive. It will not quite get as low as like Green Bay will. But what's really interesting about New Hampshire is there's no state income tax or sales tax. So the cost of living can really shine due to how little you're paying in taxes. And again, you have piles of options in New Hampshire. I would actually almost say New Hampshire is even more diverse from the standpoint of you have these beautiful woods, lakes. You can be down in Portsmouth, be down like on the ocean, on the Atlantic. You can be in a city and you're really close to other cities. You can be in Boston really fast, or you can run up to like, Bar Harbor and Acadia and like the different places up that way. So New Hampshire is really interesting. If you like the East Coast, if you like the seasons, maybe you really are into like skiing or something like that. We talked about Denver. Denver is really expensive. Cost of living is really high. Housing's really high. Go out to New Hampshire. You get some really beautiful views, a lot of skiing, a lot of other opportunities like that, and no state income tax or sales tax. So New Hampshire is really powerful as an option for where to live in retirement. Next one is a sleeper. So this is one, we have a client very close to this area, Biloxi, Mississippi, really, really low cost of living. Specifically housing is really interesting. I mean, how close you can get to the ocean and how little you have to pay for that home is very interesting. They have a 5% income tax, but that's only the top bracket is 5%. Great infrastructure. Again, there's a lot of shipping and a lot of things like that come through that city. So it generally means they keep things up pretty well. There's a lot of trucking coming through, a lot of freight getting moved through. And because of that too, because it's kind of a main shipping area, cost of living and the cost to get goods there is very, very cheap. So, very interesting. And you're obviously on the Gulf Coast. They're Gulf Coast of Mississippi. So really nice climate down there. Something to consider. For somebody that wants to go downhill skiing, Mississippi isn't the best option. But if you want to go deep sea fishing or something like that, a lot more interesting, right? So let's move on. This is one of my personal favorites, is Savannah, Georgia. Very low cost of living, no state income tax on Social Security. So here's how they do that. You have no income tax on Social Security, and you also get a $65,000 deduction if you're over 65. So what that means is you could have, let's say your Social Security benefit was $3,000 a month. We'll just round it and just say, $36,000 a year. You could have that plus the deduction of 65. You could have just over $100,000 of income in Savannah, totally tax-free. Okay, that's pretty interesting. The lifestyle options are great. A lot of water, a lot of, it's a nice sized city where there's a lot of different things to do. The food in Savannah is amazing. I don't know if you guys, follow, or if you're foodies and watch a lot of this stuff and Food Network and all these cooking competitions. Some of the best chefs in the world live in Savannah, Georgia. There's some amazing dining options down there in Savannah, and just a really cool place. A lot of history down in that part of the country in general. So just an option to think about. Like I said, the low cost of living coupled with the really, really favorable tax environment. I think Savannah, Georgia is worth a look for a lot of people. Number 6, this one's great. We have a lot of clients looking at this area right now. Knoxville, Tennessee. So not only is it really cool where you got kind of the mountain feel a little bit, not quite the same as like the Rockies, but nice views, nice terrain, very competitive cost of living. The housing is getting a little bit hot right now around there, but no state income tax. Awesome infrastructure from a technology standpoint. Most people are absolutely blown away by Tennessee. They were, I think it was Chattanooga was the first place in the country that had 1 gig internet. Super fast internet, growing really fast. A lot of tech companies are moving to Tennessee, mainly for the tax reasons, but again, a lot of really diverse lifestyle options. If you like being in the woods, you like being on lakes, you like being in a city, there's not too many cooler cities out there than Nashville, Tennessee. A lot of awesome things to do there. And you're really close to a lot of very fun options of things you can do. The climate's really awesome in Tennessee too. You're not getting the, quite as much of the extremes. You're not going to be getting like the Florida, just insane heat and humidity and things like that. It'll get warm in Tennessee, like it will in a lot of places, but a little bit more moderate. The winters will definitely not be as bad in a place like Tennessee as they are in Wisconsin or New Hampshire or Alaska. So if you like a more moderate climate, you like your seasons, you want a little bit of snow at Christmas, things like that, might want to look into Tennessee. Really cool overall option, very well-rounded. Specifically, like Knoxville, Chattanooga, Nashville, some of those types of areas. Number 5, I'm putting the entire state of Florida. So there's a lot of places that would get very expensive, like a Miami would tend to be very expensive, mainly for housing. But if you stay out of those giant metropolis type areas like Miami, you will get very competitive costs of living. And of course, a lot of people know that Florida has no state income tax. Also, because we're still in the United States, you have US infrastructure, you have a lot of great airports, you got Disney, you got a lot of great dining options, a lot of great nightlife options, awesome outdoors options. Florida's a really unique place. You can go hunting, then you can go deep sea fishing. And, there's a lot of awesome options that way in Florida. Of course, the climate there's warm. So you got to like the heat. You're not going to be getting snow down there. So take that into account. But Florida, of course, one of the most popular options as far as where to go in retirement. We're going to start kind of leaving the beaten path here shortly, but I got one more US option, Texas. Texas is absolutely exploding right now. So things depending on where you go and what you're looking at, some of the costs can get a little bit higher than they used to be. But if you stay out of the big ones, if you stay out of Dallas and downtown Austin and places like that, you can get pretty competitive cost of living, and of course, no state income tax. What I like a lot about Texas is very strong laws, a lot of legal protections in place for you and your property and different things like that. And of course, Texas might be one of the most diverse states from the standpoint of you can be up in northern Texas, and it is radically different than if you're on the coast down in like a Corpus Christi or something like that. Or if you're way over in like San Antonio, you can get more, like you stay more southwest, you can get more like almost deserty. You go north, it's a little more, what would you call it? A little more like moderate of a climate. You get down in the south, you can almost get like tropical. So depending on what you're looking for, Texas probably has some pretty good options for you. And I think in a lot of these places, you're going to have better real estate options than you would in a place like Florida. So Texas, good one to consider. Big fan of the state of Texas. So now we're going to really get a little more outside of convention here. We're going to talk about some areas outside of the United States. All of my top 3 areas are outside of the United States. This one is kind of close. Like these top 3 are all so good that if someone said, Tony, you had to leave the United States for whatever reason, these top 3 are so close. I mean, I might almost have to spin a wheel or something to pick between these top 3. Let's talk about what some of them are. So Costa Rica, the Switzerland of Central America, as it's called, amazing cost of living. I was actually running some cost of living calculators the other day and was totally shocked. I mean, a couple can live pretty ridiculously on like $3,000 or $4,000 a month in Costa Rica. I mean, like very extravagant, really favorable tax situation. So there are taxes, and Costa Rica is one that's a little complicated. Depending on your situation, you might find yourself in a little bit more of an elevated, like a 15% type of tax situation. But I would say in general, for most Americans, it's going to be favorable from a tax standpoint. You're going to get a little bit more for your money. You're going to get to keep more of your own money in Costa Rica than you would be here. Another thing I really like about Costa Rica is the healthcare there is really good. You can do a lot of research on that. If that's something that's important to you, which I think it should be on your list, that's also going to keep you more in those developed types of countries. But healthcare really good in Costa Rica. International Living, which is based out of Ireland, they do a giant quantitative analysis every year of all the countries. This year, they rank Costa Rica #1. So on their list, Costa Rica was #1. I almost made Costa Rica #2. It's somewhere in one of the best places, in my opinion. Now you gotta like that tropical feel, you gotta like that warmth. But if you do, you have great infrastructure, great internet, strong property rights, very democratic value system, and a really good tax situation. And I mean, just beautiful. I mean, look at that picture. It's ridiculous. Now I've never been to Costa Rica, but I might have to make a trip down there for some due diligence here shortly. So let's move on to a little more, I would say, traditional of like an expat option is Panama. And really strong cost of living. Again, I believe Costa Rica can get a little bit lower on the cost of living. There's a lot of variables here. If you're in a big city in one of these countries versus if you're out in the country, it can really change things. I couldn't find it. I didn't have time to look it up before this presentation, but Panama was #1 either last year or the year before by international living. I think it was 2019. I'm not 100% sure. Don't quote me on that. But again, great infrastructure. Their financial system is very intertwined with the United States. You might have seen some of these billionaires taking advantage of that if you've looked into like the Panama Papers or any of that type of thing. But really good infrastructure, really easy to do financial transactions between Panama and the United States. Really strong legal system, really good climate. And again, all three of these places, Costa Rica, Panama, and the next one I'm going to do, they're all pretty safe too. Texas, depending on where you are, I would say generally safe. Florida, you might want to avoid certain areas of certain cities, that have kind of a rougher crime situation, something you probably want to look at, obviously. But, Panama, Costa Rica, and this next one are all pretty good on the, safety front, and also just like rule of law and the types of infrastructure and resources that law enforcement has. Really good in all these places. Panama, again, it's going to be hot, so you got to like a warm climate, but a lot of English being spoken in Costa Rica, but also a lot in Panama. And then this next one is I think is really interesting for a lot of people, and that's Puerto Rico. Okay, so not only are you really competitive on a cost of living basis, but you really have U.S. infrastructure. So that it kind of got a bad rap when that hurricane came through and really jacked up the island. But I have some friends and connections down in Puerto Rico that look at this very differently, that say, hey, I'm not paying income tax, right? I'm paying, I think it's like a 4% Puerto Rican tax or something like that, but I'm not paying federal income tax. So I can take an extra 25 or 30% of my income and stick it into my house. I can have a concrete roof. I can have the steel grates that come down over my windows. I can have an industrial sized generator. I can have all that type of stuff because I'm getting to keep more of my own money. So it's interesting to think about, right? Now you have a really good climate. You have U.S. From a federal legal standpoint. There's a lot of U.S. infrastructure in place in Puerto Rico. Costa Rica, and Panama, I would say they're all very financially driven locations, but they're also all very beautiful, especially like Costa Rica and Puerto Rico. There are some pretty amazing places down there. So that's what we got for you this week on Wealth Wednesday. I hope you enjoyed it. If you're a member of our group on Facebook, Retirement Mastery, thanks so much for joining. If you haven't subscribed yet to our YouTube channel, please do that. Subscribe, like this video. Also, if you're watching it on YouTube, go ahead, comment down below. If I got anything wrong that needs a correction, let me know. Happy to do so. Happy to correct it. But also, I'm just just curious how quickly we're getting these out and up on YouTube. So let us know when you're seeing it. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Hope you're all having an awesome week. And, thanks so much for watching through all of our different channels, whether it's Retirement Mastery on Facebook or Safeguard Wealth Management on YouTube. And just always remember, you don't need more money. You need a better plan, a plan that allows you to keep more of your own money, and a plan that puts you in the places you really want to be to live your dream lifestyle in retirement. This is Tony Hellenbrand from Safeguard. Thank you guys all so much for watching. Take care.